You are now listening to Rodical Thinking with your host, Roderick McDaniel.
What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning in again for another episode of Rodical Thinking. I'm your host, Roderick McDaniel. You guys know we cover a lot of tough subjects on here. And ever since we did the episode on sex trafficking and abuse, I have started just kind of going online and reading a lot of stuff that was through the Human Rights Campaign .org or hrc.org website, and just kind of finding different things that are going on and opening my eyes up to what's going on around the world. And a lot of times issues exist, but you don't really go below the surface. You just kind of read the news story and you say it's sad, you say it's bad, and then you move on. And then I started wanting to do more, and you guys kind of know when I started the show Rodical Thinking, we did our first episode was on depression, and that was one of the things is that I've been blessed to be in a position where I have a soapbox. I have a place and an outlet where I can talk about issues and where people can actually share spotlight on things that are going on. And that's something I wanted to do, is hear people's stories and honestly connect with people. And one of the things that started bothering me was, and it's a hot topic today in our society, are trans rights. And I know when I say this to some people, they act like I just spit on their mom, and then others are glad that we're talking about it and addressing it. And it is really just shocking, the stories that I found. I mean, just shocked me to a point where I just don't want to sit quietly on the sidelines and hope somebody else does something. Today's episode is going to be dedicated to that. And I think the best way to understand a fight for a person's rights and for their dignity to be recognized as a human being is to actually talk to those people. And today's guest is going to help us to understand a lot more about what's going on in the trans community by sharing her story with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you my friend Karen. How are you doing today, Karen?
Hey, my duder. Happy Big Monday.
Hey, thank you. Man, look, you don't even know how much I appreciate you coming on the show and just talking with me about this, because I know it's not an easy subject. And I know, one, it's like, from what I've been reading, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, it just seems like a lot of times people just don't understand anything about the plight of trans men and women in this country at all.
Nope.
We're lost.
It happens when it's such a small populace of people, because then other people go, well, that doesn't affect me, so why should I care?
Yeah, no, I just want to learn more, because I read these numbers about violence against trans people and some of the horrific things that have happened, and it just seems like a lot of the cases either don't get solved, or when they do get solved, it was just a blatant hate crime. There's no other way to say it. It was a hate crime. And so I was just like, I don't understand a lot of things in this world, but this one really bothers me.
There's never any justice, it seems, for most people, but especially for trans people.
Yeah, no, it's definitely some disturbing figures. And I just looked at the 2017, 16, and 18 figures. And already in 2018, I know there have been at least 16 different transgender people were fatally shot or killed by other violent means. Already, we're in August, and these are cases where people have, like, they're still looking into it. They're still trying to figure out what happened. They're still looking for a suspect in the death. Like, out of these 16, 18 cases I pulled up, some of these going all the way back to January 5th, none of it makes sense.
It never does, but, that's what happens when you're a minority group. And what's really terrible is how oftentimes race also plays into it, because a lot of it happens to Black trans women. They get the least amount of justice because now they're having to cross two minority groups that have their own sets of oppressions against them. And they're some of the bravest people, because I couldn't possibly comprehend having to deal with, it's bad enough to deal with being trans, but then to also have to deal with the racist angle to it, or even just the kind of prejudices that may come within their own community. Because a lot of times you'll see that it's a black trans woman who is maybe shot or killed by a black man, and they usually cry something along the lines of trans panic defense, as it's like to be thrown around. But it even happens to, Latina and Asian and white women as well. So it affects every one of us, but it's disproportionately affecting black trans women the most, which is especially sad.
Wow. You're right, because in the black community, there are issues where when we talk about sexuality in the black community, it's almost a toxic subject, because I've heard even, women raising boys on their own, unfortunately, telling their little boys, oh, don't cry because you're a big boy. And I'm like, why are you putting that toxic masculinity on this child already?
Oh, yeah.
This is your chance to make a change, to raise the black men we need in this community. And you're spouting some toxic crap that from years back that we don't even need to be bringing into the black community. Raise better children. Don't raise the same bitter children. But that is its own episode and another time. Let's talk about your story. You from Louisiana, correct?
Yes, sir. It's hot.
Oh, God, I know it is.
Very hot.
Now, you grew up there your whole life? Lived in this?
Aside from the year and a half I lived in Austin, pretty much have been in Southwest Louisiana my whole life.
So, I'm already going to say it right now. Being in that area, we're talking around like Alexandria, Lafayette, Lake Charles, all in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Not easy to be a trans woman in that area, I take it.
Not at all, but I'd like to think it's probably a slight bit better experience than if I were to live in some place like Mississippi or maybe Alabama, definitely Oklahoma. I think there's been laws and stuff that have been tossed around in Oklahoma, particularly pertaining to us. So as far as I know, there haven't been any kind of legislation in Louisiana that's been proposed trying to legalize some kind of discrimination. But the people here, they tend to not be as educated. I think Louisiana is the least educated in the whole country, which is unfortunate because, education would fix most things.
Isn't that the key for everything? That's it.
It would be, but some people, they don't want to learn, or they don't want to know better. Is the big case. You just look at. I'd hate to point it out specifically, but you look in the case of like our previous election about just how many people were okay just being fed things and didn't necessarily want to look into things, and were more so told how to think than given facts and then be allowed to draw their own conclusion from those facts. And it still happens, and that's just part of the process. That's, I guess, media for you.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong on that. So, I want to hear for you, what was your journey like?
Well, first, I'd have to point out that I am not representative of the whole population of trans people. I have my experience, and I've also been privy to my own set of privileges that others haven't. And there's definitely been a lot of people who've had to go through a lot harsher things than me, but there's also people that go through some better things, and that's everybody's journey. I guess for me it's a lot of the same stories you hear over and over of this is something that's affected us our whole lives, from early childhood memories of, I wouldn't necessarily say trying to things like wanting to play with dolls or something. I didn't necessarily really care about playing with dolls and stuff like that, but I did like the color pink, even though when you're raised as a boy, you get the blue toys, or you get these other things. The pink stuff is for the girls. Don't touch that. Even if I wanted to, look into the Barbie section of Toys R Us, rest in peace, Toys R Us.
Yeah, no joke. A moment of silence for them.
Yeah, just to check out the stuff. And aside from like Barbies and stuff, there's still like cool toys that I wished I could have, even something like an easy bake oven, which I don't think is necessarily a gendered specific toy, but they mostly kind of push that towards girls early on, I guess, to kind of get it in their minds that you're going to be the ones cooking and you got to follow this role, I guess. But whatever. Because I liked things like, video games, because my brothers had video games, and of course, you want to get into things that your older siblings are into, and my brothers are like 8 and 9 years older than me, so there's a huge gap. And when you have older siblings, you want to kind of do stuff that they do and get into stuff they do because you think that's cool, right? Yeah, you want to get into the video games. They liked to get Transformers and Voltron toys. So, when I was a kid, I was given Power Rangers, which I thought they were pretty cool. Of course, the video games, my brothers were into wrestling, which is a thing that's still stuck to me with to this day, because I think, pro wrestling is something that once it's in you, it's hard to ever get out. It's a lifelong thing. But really, like, the earliest I can remember, like, as far as taking to other kids, like, the first friend I could remember was this girl named Kristen, and she was actually the youngest sister of my oldest brother's best friend. So he'd be hanging out with his best friend, I'd be hanging out with her, and, we just do things, play with toys, play video games, hang out. Going into, like, elementary school, that's when they really kind of start putting people into groups. Like, early childhood, you're just kind of spending time with your parents and your family for the most part. But once you get into school, it's when, they say high school cliques, but cliques kind of form in elementary school even. And they usually kind of divide it down to boys and girls. That's like the original cliques. Oh, yeah. But even in, like, kindergarten, I liked going and hanging out and playing with girls. I hang out play with boys too, because they'd kind of be pushed into that direction, and I just kind of accepted the directions that I was being pushed in, even if I didn't necessarily like them that much. I wanted to go and spend more time around the girls, but eventually they had these few girls from school that I made friends with that actually lived next door to me, named Lacey and Lauren. They were sisters, and so I'd go and hang out with them a whole bunch, be jealous of all the cool stuff they got, all the nice clothes and nice room, and get to go do stuff like dancing and take dancing stuff. And I wanted to do that stuff, but then if I wanted to bring it up, there was always that worried about people putting me down, because as soon as any boys, I guess, start expressing feminine interests, the first reaction from most people is to cut them down and just shut it down. They don't want that happening, especially in a household that's Catholic. So I was raised Catholic. My whole family's Catholic. And, my parents are conservative Republicans. So they were not necessarily the kind of people that wanted to let you express that, because they weren't expecting that from you. They're expecting you to follow certain traits. And, that's what my brothers did, but I didn't really want to. But I kind of had to just accept what was given to me.
Right.
Like, when we moved into this is the house that we still have, like 20 years later, but when we first moved here, this 2-story house, there was a bedroom upstairs that was all nice and pink, and a girl lived in it, and, had this nice little wallpaper around it, and they're like, all right, you're going to be moving into this room, so we're going to paint over it pale yellow.
Right.
Which is the ugliest color in the world, pale yellow, over this pretty looking pink that it had. And I always thought that was kind of sad. And I know my dad put for the light switch, he put like a light switch case cover thing. It had like a football player on it. And I don't really give a damn about football, but that's trying to boy it up some, I guess, thinking that would be appropriate. But I just accepted it because that's what I was given. Even though, like, later I'd put Sailor Moon stickers on the doors and walls and stuff, because I loved Sailor Moon as a kid. That was a great show. I used to run home from school to watch Sailor Moon. That's how much I loved it.
Yeah, first of all, I like Sailor Moon, so yeah, you were just smart. That's all that says to me. That's what that says.
I mean, so that'd probably be when I was like 8 or 9 or 10, that area of time when Sailor Moon was being played on Cartoon Network, and then they'd have like a half-hour break to play something, and then Dragon Ball Z would come on after that.
Yep.
So, of course, all the kids watched Dragon Ball Z. And, I would watch Dragon Ball Z because it was decent, but I was really into watching the Sailor Moon because I really liked the characters. I really felt for the characters. I really identified with a lot of the characters. So that still sticks with me. I used to have the whole manga series and some posters and stuff. Some of the best stuff I ever enjoyed as a kid was Sailor Moon stuff.
That's awesome. You sound like you knew pretty quick, then, that, yeah, I'm not falling into this preconceived notion of what I should be falling into.
Well, I didn't really know why it was like that, though. It's just these were things that I felt, and it was better to hide it than to really talk about it to people, because if you talk about it to people, well, that can cause problems. So I just kind of learned to keep things bottled up inside, and that would be an unfortunate thing I'd do for like most of my life, is learn to just bottle things up inside and become more of the implosive type of person rather than explosive. Because I don't know how well you remember being around me back when we worked together. I'm very chill.
Oh,
I like to be tranquilo. That's my Naito reference. I love Naito from New Japan. I like to be tranquilo, but things will bother me, and they will bother me for a long time. I'll hold them up and let it swell, and especially if it's in relating to like a person or what somebody's done to me, eventually that's gonna make a big explosion, and something's gonna happen. But luckily, that hasn't been too many times in my life. But trying to keep that stuff in as a kid was not fun. And it wasn't until probably because I was looking at mid to late 90s, so the internet was just starting to come into play for a lot of people. We had AOL at one point, and that was my first times going onto the internet, being able to explore things. The internet was really fun in the late 90s because there was all kinds of cool stuff you could find. It's all kinds of cool chat rooms you can go into. I'd go and hang out in a Sailor Moon chat room most of the time. And just be able to express things with people that aren't in front of you. So you could, let a bit of yourself out without any real repercussions, I guess.
Yep, that's true. Because it was so anonymous back then.
Oh, yeah. Way more than it is now. But even then, I didn't necessarily know what these feelings meant and why people, I just thought I was weird or, worried that somebody is going to be like, oh, you're a faggot. Look at you. And you don't want to be singled out like that, especially in Louisiana.
No, you don't. You do not.
So it's, it was nice to make relationships with people over the internet that I could talk to and express things. And I didn't necessarily know what it was that was necessarily wrong with me or why I felt this way, but maybe, was I gay or something or what? And I'd try to talk to guys, talk to boys and see how that felt. It was weird because I just wasn't necessarily I was drawn to men or anything like that, but I did like the attention. Is a weird thing that's actually gotten it more extreme as I've gotten older, where men like to pay attention to pretty girls, I guess. So that's skyrocketed. But I liked the attention then, and I just wanted more and more to be like one of the pretty girls that I saw, especially the pop singers back then. I was big on people like Christina Aguilera. This was 1999, stuff like that. Around that time where you had the teeny boppers come out.
Yeah.
Around then. So I really liked those kind of acts and personas. And, I guess people when they're young, they have their people that they look up to. and idolize and want to be like. And those are like my kinds of people. Right. But puberty was happening, and all these things were changing about my body that I really, really hated. I really hated all the hair growing on me. I hated, my voice deepening, which is something that still affects me to this day. But even just like growing inside, like when my mom or my dad would be like, "Oh, well, you're taller than your brothers were at that age, so you're gonna grow up to be like 6'5" or something like that," and I'd be like terrified of that prospect of possibly being 6'5". I didn't want to be big because my dad was 6'4", brothers were like 6'2", 6'1", so seemed like I was on track to be around that. But
right.
Luckily, I'm 5'11", so I'm tall, but I'm not too tall. I'm not suspiciously tall.
Right.
Which is unfortunate for others like me that are suspiciously tall, because then that makes them an easy target. But
oh yeah, I mean you're tall, but you're not going to be a point forward in the NBA either. So
no. Although I did like to play basketball when I was a kid. That was one of the few sports I enjoyed, because I also had a really good friend when I was young. There's this black kid named Miles. He was really awesome, and he taught me how to play basketball. And for the most part, all it was that I had to do was get the ball from the other kids and pass it to him. And he would take care of everything else. But I just had so much fun playing the game of basketball that, that's all it was for me. And he was like a couple years older than me, so I'd be like third grader playing basketball with all these like fifth grade kids that were considerably taller because, growth spurts at puberty at that point. So I didn't mind stuff like that, but I wasn't out to be like, really physical, like sportsy. I just thought basketball was fun, and that's the only reason I liked it. I really just kind of like more sedentary stuff, like playing video games, unfortunately, because, it's easy to escape into those things. And so as a kid, I sought out a lot of escape for a lot of reasons, obviously, especially early on in games like EverQuest, like the first MMORPG I ever played. And, making girl characters in that and giving them kind of an identity to them and liking being part of that identity. And I know that a lot of other people like me, they played games like WoW and stuff like that, where you want to make these avatars that kind of represent how you feel you are. And not everybody is like that, but I think with us, it happens a lot. So I liked doing that and finding ways to kind of express what I felt inside through other means, whether it was through the way I would talk to people in chat rooms or playing video games, stuff like that, trying some way to let this out of me, pretty much. And it worked for a bit until I was like 14 or so, and then that's when my dad was like kind of the suspicion that whenever any of us was on the internet, all we were doing was looking at porn. So he was really like strict about monitoring and managing, not necessarily monitoring, but managing time. So I ended up getting less and less time to really explore and learn things. But oddly enough, it was through pornography that I would learn about there being people like women who have penises, and like, why? What? Yeah. That's because you not really knowing what this is. How are these people even in existence? And that was a bit confusing, but also interesting, because it's like, are they just women who were born with that, and not having the information to really understand what kinds of people these were that, everyone else just thought were weirdos and freaks. And, oh, if you look at that stuff, you're gay and stuff like that. So trying to avoid some of that stuff, but also still be curious as to what it was really about and trying to find out about it. But eventually it got to a point where I guess my dad would find stuff that I'd be looking at, which was really just to look at to see how I felt about these things. So various kinds. Obviously, you don't want kids to be looking at pornography, but when you're 15 or so, obviously 15-year-olds do that. but I was more so just trying to figure out what it was I felt. Like, what do I feel when I see this kind of stimuli? What are my thoughts when I see this stimuli? And a lot of times it was, I wish I could be those girls that I'd see in these things. More so than like if it was straight porn of like the guy doing the girl, it was more so I wanted to be the girl. And I didn't really know how to explain that or why I even felt that way. But it's weird because people think this is a all based around a sexual thing,
Right.
but it's really not based around a sexual thing. There is a sexual part of it because we're all humans and we all have, you know, our own sexualities, and sex is a part of human nature. But that's definitely an alarming thought to have of, man, I wish I could be her instead than, you know, the other guy.
Right. And so you were saying you were at 14, 15?
It'd be like 14, 15 around this time. And once like confronted about it is when I'm like, okay, I have to shove this shit down and bottle it up and forget about it because it's just causing me problems. And I got to try and be something else, distract myself in some way to not think about these things. Mm-hmm. Which, you know, didn't help that also around that time, my middle brother, Dustin's, his ex-wife used to live here with us when they were first together because they had a baby together and stuff. But, you know, I was intrigued about like her makeup and her clothes and stuff, and even like her panties and stuff, not even to be like weird and sexual about it, just wanting to like try stuff on. And that's another thing that I find out a lot of us do, is that we're drawn to want to try out clothes and see how we feel in those clothes. And they felt better than just, you know, wearing normal boys' clothes and stuff like that, which, you know, I always wore pants because I was getting hairy legs, and I hated my hairy legs so much I didn't want anyone to see my hairy legs. So I'd be wearing pants in the middle of summer just to cover that up. Right. That's how bad it was. That's how, I guess, dysphoric is what I now know that was, especially as like hair would develop on my chest and my shoulders and back and stuff. And when I'd see like my dad walk by without his shirt on and like how hairy he was, and I'd be like, I hope I don't look like that. And he's like, you will. And that was just terrifying. That like made me so depressed and sad, just with my body changing like that.
It was betraying you almost.
Yeah, like you know, for one, when I was a smaller kid, I was very skinny. So then when puberty hit, I like got fat, and I was already like hating that part that was happening. But then all this other stuff happening to me, I really hated that too. Right. But then reaching back to the point of I just had to try to find a way to shove it down and forget about it and try to move on from it. And that was when I was getting old enough to get a job. And what ended up happening was my family has a history at working with Domino's Pizza, specifically one particular store that was right by our house. So both of my brothers have worked there. Both of their wives have worked there. So there's a pretty like established family history there, and that people kind of had expectations of like that particular family. So when they were trying to help me get a job and I go over there to get this job, they're like, oh, well, you're related to, you know, your brothers used to work here and they were great workers and their wives are great workers. So we'll give you a job. And trying to learn how to, I guess, put on a persona in front of them. That was kind of an amalgamation of various aspects of my brothers and my dad to try and make this like hybrid personality that I'd kind of put on for them. It also didn't help that after 6th grade, I was homeschooled. Oh, wow. So I went to a public school all the way up to 5th grade. And then for 6th grade, my parents put me in a Catholic school for a year. And that was terrible. I hated that place so much. The kids there were terrible. They'd always call me they'd always be calling me a faggot and all kinds of stuff. Because I guess I was just a little bit more naturally effeminate. Mm-hmm. And people picked up on that. So then you have to try and like defend yourself. against that and learn to toughen up, I guess is what they would do. But
Right.
after that year, I was homeschooled because I'd have all kinds of problems, particularly around that time, being like 99, 2000, Columbine happened. So I was being looked at more and more by teachers and staff there as a potential problem child from just being more depressed and kind of withdrawn from people. That I would be like sent to counselors fairly often over there. And, you know, I'd write things too that, you know, sounded depressed. And particularly in the 6th grade, all those kids were terrible to me. I used to write in this journal we had, because I don't know if you were in elementary school, they did that for you, but they'd have us have these little journal books, and you'd come in and the teacher would have something on the board, like, all right, write about this. And instead of writing about those things, I would just write about how I felt. And it's like I was speaking directly to the teacher through these journal entries that we'd have. So I'd express my feelings about these kids and the things that I wish I could do to them. And that was not a particularly good thing to do, because then they really got scared. I think one entry I did was about this kid, and I mentioned how I would like to see him burned alive.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah, because he was just a terrible dude. He was constantly messing with me. But I also knew that the journals were sitting by the door, so the kids would stand around that door and read all the journals. So they would read that, and then they'd stop messing with me.
Well, it had the effect that you wanted it to have. So that's, I mean, yeah, I get it. Now you're singled out by the teachers because now they're looking at you like, okay, she's going to shoot the place up.
Yeah, and it didn't help that, you know, I liked listening to Marilyn Manson, and I played Doom, and just before they implemented uniforms all across Louisiana, you know, I'd go to school in like 4th and 5th grade at least with like black t-shirts that had wrestling t-shirts or band t-shirts. So I was wearing black a lot, and I guess almost kind of seemingly looking and appearing like one of those Columbine shooters, even though I wasn't intending to be that way. That's just how I was. It was the style I had to adopt then. So yeah, I was going off. After the Catholic school thing, I was homeschooled. So my whole like puberty years of being away from people and not really learning social skills and being around others and learning how to be myself, because I didn't think I could be myself. So I had to create a persona to put on around these people when I would get this job. And it worked.
Yeah.
It worked. People at the place liked me. They liked having me around. I apparently was funny to them and, you know, make people laugh. And I like to make people feel better when they're around. If I could somehow brighten up their day by making them laugh or something, that's what I like to do. I like to sort of put that positivity out there in the world when I'm actually really this extremely negative person inside. But I'd work at this job and kind of just kept putting on this act, I guess. You know, they just kind of accepted me as another one of the crew members, and that I was like my brothers, and didn't feel like I was really going anywhere, because then it's like 17, 18, 19. I've got a GED when I was 17 because I basically dropped out of school before I was even in high school.
Right.
It was weird. Not really knowing what I wanted to do or how to even do it, because I was still so unsure of myself, because I wasn't necessarily being myself. I needed to do something that people expected of me. And at that point, all people expected out of me was to work at this Domino's job. So that's just what I kept doing. Eventually it would be like a manager and stuff like that. And I've even been a driver before. And so I've been like all kinds of different positions there. And there was a time where I tried to go work at like Best Buy. I wanted to sell computers because I knew about computers. But then they stuck me in home theater and wanted me to sell TVs. So I tried my best at that, but then they laid me off after the holidays. So it kept going back to this Domino's job after every time of trying to escape from it. Over and over and over again. Until eventually, I don't know how I came across this idea, but I wanted to move to Austin. Because Austin had a video game industry there, and I kept thinking, if I could get to Austin, maybe I could try to get into QA testing and be a tester, because that doesn't require any college. And I was afraid of college because everybody I knew was going to college and getting into massive amounts of debt and not getting any jobs afterwards. So that was all I really saw from it. And I think all I really did was try to call up one of my brother's friends that lived in Austin and see if I could stay on a couch there. And he's like, sure, you can come stay on my couch and try to get on your feet. And the week that I was going to go was also the week that they had the game developers conference there too. So I drove in on like a Sunday or something like that, making that 6-hour trip from where I'm at over to Austin. And then on a Monday, driving into downtown Austin for the first time and going to the game developers conference with resumes and stuff, trying to, talk to companies and be like, yeah, you need QA testers, because BioWare Austin was still, developing the Old Republic there. So they were looking for QA. So I was like, this is perfect. I can try and get in on this or something like that. That would be my foot in the door. It's all I needed was a foot in the door to try and be somebody. I just wanted so badly to be somebody because I felt like I was nobody, because I wasn't even me. So I needed some kind of shell or mask or something to put on to be like, look at me, I'm successful. I'm in Austin, living this life. I was just living on a couch. That still was a big upgrade for me, because then there's all kinds of cool stuff in Austin. I can go to the arcade. I can, play fighting games there. I could go down to the independent wrestling shows. They were awesome too. Yeah. And while I was in Austin, these feelings kind of start coming back. And since I'm away from everybody else, it's time to actually kind of confront and explore them, I guess. Or at least that's how I began to feel about them. Because once you're away from everybody you've ever known, you can kind of create your own identity.
This your first time you get to be you.
Yeah. So I'm trying to talk to other LGBT people and be like, I don't know what it is. What if I'm just a gay dude or something like that? And maybe trying to talk to some of these people. And I'd made friends with actually some of them, oddly enough, and tell them about how I feel. And they're like, well, you're not this, so you need to be exploring these other things. And that's when I would be investigating more on the internet about, what it actually was to be transgender and all these other stories that these other people would have that sounded awfully similar to mine. Not everyone was similar to mine, but a lot of the same recollection of feelings at certain times in their life, and learning about how these people change, and seeing people once they're able to get on hormone therapy and how it changed them so much. And I wanted very badly to be more like them because I wasn't feeling like myself at all. So I looked into it more, thought that maybe I could do it while I was in Austin, but again, the only thing I could do for work while I was there was work at a Domino's. So never ended up getting a job at any of those game developers, but I could work at Domino's. It's an easy job to get.
You had that Domino's game locked up for a while, it sounds like, even when you were here. So what year did you get to Austin?
2011. So I was coming in on early October 2011. So I was 23 then. I'd be turning 24 at the end of that. No, I was turning 24 at the end of that month. Wow. And by the time December was coming around, is when I'm really struggling with these feelings. I'm buying a lot of alcohol and drinking a lot. Conveniently, one of the drivers at the store I worked at also sold weed, so that also helped cope and distract myself. So I was constantly needing substances to keep myself together, and I really didn't like being like that. Especially since I drove back here for Christmas for just a couple days. So I come back here, and in that period of time that I was there, a couple months, I had lost a whole bunch of weight. I ended up becoming like the slimmest I had ever been in my adult life. So the person that came back and everyone saw was like the most improved boy version of me that anyone's ever seen. So it was like all these apparently girls that I knew were talking to me. And if I had probably stayed that way, I could have been okay, at least as far as other people were concerned. But I was not okay at all with being like that. So eventually the decision came to I couldn't afford to try and transition, or really what I wanted to do was go and get into therapy. Mm-hmm. That was the biggest thing, was trying to like find a therapist to talk about this stuff with. Right. Which I wish a lot more other trans people would do, because a lot of people in that community are trying to like advocate against, counseling and stuff like that, of, oh, you don't need somebody to tell you who you are, you identify. No, you kind of do need to talk to somebody about this stuff. But so I moved back here and found a therapist that was like an hour and a half away. So I would every month, and of course I got back to working at Domino's, and I was living back here at my parents' house again. So I felt like I failed on my endeavor to go to Austin, become somebody, but I was like, well, I'm having to come back here to start this transition. But I didn't actually end up living in my parents' house right away at first, because I had this friend of mine who lived in a trailer park with his girlfriend, and I was able to come out to them and express that, I'm coming back here to do this. I'm trying to get help, because I always felt like I was this woman. I've always wanted to be this woman, and they were cool. They were basically the first people I came out to, and that I'd already known, that just accepted me, and that was nice. Mm-hmm. It was like the hardest thing to do, coming out that first time, but once it happened, it was such a relief to finally tell somebody, and stayed with them while I worked at the Domino's, and I drove to my therapist and go for a couple times a month, until eventually I'd, talk to him and tell him about my story and my feelings. And he's like, well, you have gender dysphoria, so I'm writing a letter of recommendation for you to get hormones. And then eventually I started hormone replacement therapy. And that started my transition. So then it begun.
So let me ask you something. Now, you're starting the hormones. Have you told your parents about what's about to happen before you started it, or?
I'm trying to remember, but I had a plan. Mm-hmm. I had this plan to how I was going to go about coming out to family members, because my therapist was like, you're going to need to tell these people eventually, sooner rather than later. Oh, yeah. But it was one thing to tell friends, because I told, my friend Brock and Lily, the people I was staying with. Eventually I told these two other guy friends I had, Phil and Dwight. And these are like gamer buddies, mm-hmm. Kind of bro dudes. Even though like Dwight was gay, he is like the straightest gay dude.
Right.
One of those types. It was oftentimes I'd go hang out at their apartment to play Call of Duty. That was that kind of thing. Back when that was popular. So I had a plan, and so I figured the best way to start was to tell my mom. So I don't think I had started hormones at this point, but I was definitely in therapy. So I'm probably thinking February or March-ish of 2012, because I didn't actually start hormones until like April 25th. April 25th is my hormone anniversary, so I guess at this point, 6.5 years? Right. Yeah, okay. And I go to tell her, and I tell her in the car while we're sitting parked in our driveway, and she knew I was going to therapy, but she didn't necessarily know why. But she was happy that I was going to therapy. And so I tell her that I, always felt this way and I want to start transitioning to become this. Because I always saw this as I just want to be the best me I can possibly be, which it's hard to kind of get people to buy into stuff like that, because it's, well, aren't you always the best you can possibly be? But no, not for me at that time. Especially when I was breaking down so much, drinking so much, getting drunk so much, looking into drugs a lot. It was not fun to exist like that, and I just kind of gave myself up to God in a sense, because I am a deist. I believe in a God. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily fond of religion, but I still believe in a God. And I'm like, just please make me the best me I could possibly be, whatever that is. I'm going to follow whatever path it is you put in front of me, and I'll walk that path. Right. Which I guess leads me up to now, but I knew I was walking down this path, and I tried to present it like that to my mom, and she seemed like she was handling it okay in the car talking to her. And I had plans to tell each of my other family members, but she just goes and tells all of them.
Whoa.
Yeah, completely betraying my trust on that one too. So that was disappointing. Like, I was trying to figure out, okay, I'm gonna probably have to tell my brother Dustin and my dad last, because they're the most hard-ass conservative dudes. They watch Fox News all day, every day, especially my dad. He'll put it on 7 a.m. when he wakes up, and then he'll have it on, even if he's not, Fox News is just on the TV, just to give you an idea. And about 8 p.m. is when they would shut it off and go to something else, because that was when Bill O'Reilly was over at that point, and they loved Bill O'Reilly. Now it's Tucker Carlson or whoever the fuck is in that time slot now, but
so they're still watching it, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, they're that kind of peoples where they watch that stuff up so much and they buy that message up so much that I'd have to be very delicate with how I'd present things, and that went out the window because as I've come to learn, you can make all the plans you want, but nothing ever goes according to plan.
Exactly.
Ever. So, my brother Chris, my oldest brother, he was okay. He was cool. He was like, I understand. I've always kind of felt there was something weird about you. Or, I don't know if you necessarily put it like that, but something different about you. Because, a lot of people would think that I was gay or something like that when I was young. Especially, like, his friends that I'd be around. And it was weird trying to be around people here, because I don't know how best to put it. It was like, maybe they thought that they were losing somebody. They weren't really losing somebody, because they still kind of just addressed me the same way, even as I was beginning, which just ended up being more awkward over time. Still referring to me by my dead name, still male pronouns, because after just a few months of being on hormones, just going outside and going places, people just started addressing me as ma'am and her and she, when I wasn't really trying to be. It was kind of this weird period where I was very androgynous looking, because my hair was beginning to grow out, and boobs are starting to form on my chest too.
Right.
And I was just being myself, not trying to put on a mask or put on a show, just being myself and how I wanted to act and how I felt about things. And so I guess once it was getting to the point where enough people were just naturally addressing me as such, which that's a unique privilege in and of itself, is a privilege of passing. But it's not like I thought I was going to end up passing so much, but it started. So after like 4 months of hormones, which during that time, I ended up having to come live back here again, and really, I just stayed in my room all the time. I didn't really want to be around anyone, especially my middle brother, Dustin. Me and his relationships really took a turn for the worst, which really sucked because he was always Bubba Dustin to me. Mm-hmm. He was this really gentle, nice, and funny dude to me. Really took care of me and looked out for me, and then changed. Like the way he acted around me, the way he treated me just changed. And a lot of people, especially at work, started to change as they saw me change and the way they acted around me. And they were just much more distant. And none of that felt good, even though I was feeling better taking these hormones, because then eventually, like, the first month was just a starting dosage. So it was like half of what they would normally give people, kind of just to see if you have any bad reactions to it. But then once I got like on the full-on dosage, I felt like this fog and this net over my brain had been lifted, and I, for the first time, felt good. Like I didn't want to die. That's how great it felt, because all my other times before, I just kind of hated existing that way. And now I was starting to not hate that and start to look forward to things. And as I'm changing and developing, it was a lot of things, but it was fun, but also scary, and traumatic, but it all ended up kind of being for the better. I just had to kind of endure things and the way people changed around me and adapt to it, because I know they were having to adapt, so I needed to adapt to them having to adapt, which a lot of people still haven't adapted, even 6.5 years later. But
so you still have some that are like, do they still refer to you by the male pronouns, or?
My dad, that's not going to change. He is like a stone golem. He is unshakable. You cannot, if he is hell-bent on a certain thing or thinking a certain way about something, you cannot change him on that. Maybe that comes from him being a cop for 30 years, which was kind of scary in of itself, because, sometimes he didn't switch off of the cop mode. But, this dude, when he was 22, had like a couple different black belts and a few different martial arts, and was this really proficient fighter. And he was a former like football player. He played for the Detroit Lions back in the 70s. He worked in a car plant in Detroit. Then he came back here and became a cop. So he's just been this manly man, this super manly man, actually. But he's not gonna change on it. To him, I'm always gonna be his son. And he's let me stay. He didn't hate me for it. He just, oddly enough, while everybody else changed the way they acted, my dad did not change the way he acted. He treated me exactly the same way he did before. Aside from the fact that he really hated the fact that I had a purse and used to make me not bring my purse inside the house. I'd have to leave it in my car. And it was always a big deal. He's changed on that now, but back then, especially in that first year, he was really adamant about me not having a purse. I don't know if he had grasped or accepted it yet at that point, but, he didn't change despite how everybody else changed, despite how I was changing. So I think that's both a good thing and a bad thing, because I thought it was weird how everybody else was changing the way they acted around me, mostly for the worst, and he just kind of stayed the same. Yeah, it's still not fun to be around him, and it still is sort of a bizarro world thing where I'm out and about in the world and people all address me a certain way, and then I come and step into this house, and then all that is out the door. It's now I'm being addressed entirely differently, and I just have to accept it, because if I've tried to fight him on it, I've tried to, argue with him about it, I've tried to beg and plead for him to change on that. He's not going to change on that.
Right.
And I don't know if that's just a really advanced mind game that he plays as a way to sort of toughen me up, or if he's just an ignorant bigot. He's not going to change on that. But I think maybe because I'm, his youngest child, maybe he's trying to toughen me up and be like, if you get really upset over me saying these kind of things, how are you going to deal with other people out there in the world? My mom, she tries. She calls me Karen and tries to say the right pronouns, and she will slip up, and she gets upset when she slips up. And I'm like, don't worry. It's not that big of a deal, because these people have, I've been in their lives for 3 decades. It's hard for people to change like that. So I don't expect them to be 100%. It's just, it'd be nice if my dad would at least try for 10% as opposed to 0%.
Yeah, dads are, they're a different breed of guys. And I mean, well, he at least now is cool with the purse, but like you say, he's a hard one to change, man. He just sounds like he's really stuck in it. What about your brothers? Are you still, you and the one brother, are you still kind of distant, or have things gotten better?
He's still not fun to be around. I mean, he says that he's not going to, treat me any different like he used to in a, oh, you're my brother, so I love you because you're my brother, or something like that. But he also says stuff like, oh, well, the only true book that's ever been made in this world is the Bible. That kind of thing. And, his 2 oldest sons, my nephews, they're cool. They've changed their stuff on it. They've learned to accept and adapt. They're also not too terribly fond of their dad, so... and his other 2 sons are like way younger. So I know that I'm not going to have a hand in their upbringing and being able to control their view of me.
Right.
So I kind of end up not caring about them that much. It's like, yeah, they're my nephews and they're related, so, whatever. They're okay, but I don't have relationships with them. I don't really talk to them or interact with them. His current wife, I don't know if I've even ever had a conversation with her. Because I don't, if he's around and they're around, I don't really want to be around. Right. I don't even necessarily want to be around my family most of the time. Even my brother that is kind of accepting, there's all kinds of other weirdness about the way he is and the way he kind of acts and treats people that I'm not too good on. He's a good guy and he does good things for people, but he's got other problems that he deals with, and I wish him the best in trying to overcome those problems. But I don't know if there's like a slight animosity towards me or some jealousy towards me, but whatever. He's my brother and I love him. And I love all my family members. I just don't like being around them. So that's why Austin was always that weird goal to like try to move to Austin, because that was it's a haven of sorts.
Yeah. It was definitely a more accepting community down here.
Yeah, I would feel considerably more comfortable being there than here. Where here, I feel like even in just day-to-day interactions with people, I've got to put on the best defense and be cautious and wary of everyone. Can't let people know. And if people know, they can't be running their mouths, because that could possibly endanger me in some way. And I ain't about that. I ain't playing that.
Right. Well, let's actually talk about that, because you were, when I met you and you were here in Austin, you were in a relationship at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I take it because of, was he also from that same area?
He was from northern Louisiana, more towards like Alexandria. Okay. But the more backwaters parts of Louisiana. Mm-hmm. I met him on Craigslist, oddly enough.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Options are very slim here, especially for people like me. Even though when I was first starting to present as myself, and I was like, I'm going to... Because before that point, it's not like I could just go on dating sites or try to get to know people for a relationship, because I was still rapidly changing. And trying to present a certain way at that point would have been very disingenuous, compared to how I would eventually be. So it couldn't do it then. So once I started to pass a lot more, is when I started to and present as myself. And I hate to say dress, because cross-dressers use that a whole bunch, where they like, let's go dress up. No, I wore t-shirts and jeans and Converse. That's dressing up for me. That's just, so it's skinny jeans that I bought from the women's section of Walmart, and these are pink or purple Converse, but I'm very relaxed in my attire. I don't go all out. I still wear a lot of the same t-shirts. I have a Ring of Honor shirt right now on me, because Ring of Honor is cool, and I saw them in New Orleans.
No complaints. No complaints.
Yeah, the Kenny Omega show with him and Cody the day before WrestleMania. That was great. But those are things that are just still things I like. So that's just part of my presentation. But my face had changed a bunch, putting on makeup and stuff, and developing looks, I guess. And my hair getting longer, and feeling more comfortable trying to present out to people. So then I started to try and make dating site profiles and stuff. And I remember the night that I first set up a OkCupid and a Plenty of Fish profile. The moment I put it up and had pressed the save on the About Me's and had uploaded some pictures of me that I had taken, my phone just started to go off nonstop for hours. Just constant new messages from people. And it was always men messaging me too. So it was weird suddenly having a whole bunch of attention like that.
Right.
And I didn't have anything necessarily on my profile saying that I'm a trans woman. Just being me, saying the things that I like and about my personality and my pictures up there. And, hundreds and hundreds of messages from all these dudes just coming at me. And I'd never experienced anything like that before, ever. It was insane. I didn't know how to handle it. So I'd talk to all these men, and we'd have these great conversations, and a lot of them seemed like sweet dudes. And eventually I'd have to tell them, and it would always be the same results and the same kind of setup to it. They'd always be like, oh, you're so pretty. Oh, you've got a great personality. You're the perfect girl for me. Yeah, over and over and over. And then as soon as I'd tell them, either they stop talking to me, or they say that they're not gay. Or they'd say something worse. They'd say something directly to me, like I'm the great deceiver or something like that. Mm-hmm. Not that I went to these dudes and, tried to get their attention, but they were coming to me and messaging me, and so they were drawn to me, and then suddenly not drawn to me anymore. And it was heartbreaking.
Yeah, because they're looking at you and thinking, oh, she's perfect, and then you tell them the truth, and now it's like, oh, you lied to me, you tricked me. And it's not that. They came at you.
Yeah, and I didn't say on there I was specifically looking for men or women. I will say that as I was progressing on hormones, my attractions to men started to increase, which they never really had been there before. They had sort of been there before, but not super strong. I guess more so the ideation of like I mentioned earlier, like seeing the women with the men. I wanted to be them, the women. But these guys are just, they came at me. And I'm not really trying to brag about it. It's just, it was a crazy experience having so much sudden attention, and then everyone just rejection.
Right.
And before then, trying to live as a dude and trying to date, I may have had like 2 girlfriends, and none of those relationships lasted more than a month. So it's not like I was particularly experienced, and didn't have I guess what they used to say, game about me. So it's not like I could really draw people in. And then all of a sudden, people were just coming to me. So that was weird. But over time, just constant rejections. Eventually, I had to I didn't want to look towards Craigslist, but I knew Craigslist was there. But unfortunately, all Craigslist had at the time for any romantic section relating to trans people was in the casual encounters area.
Right.
And if you looked at back then, the casual encounters area was a lot of prostitutes.
Oh yeah.
So and I used to do a funny thing where me and my friends would sit around, I'd read posts from the T for M section of Craigslist just to read out the titles and the messages inside and how hilarious they were. They like to sneak in their phone numbers and they're looking for generous men only, generous gentlemen only, stuff like that. Or there's also the weirdos, cross-dressers that are just, I'm a little sissy boy that likes to take it in the ass while wearing pantyhose or some shit. That was the kind of post that you see there. So I'm I can't, how? This is it?
Yeah.
I can't meet anybody on these sites. Even when I'd actually put on those other sites that I'm trans in the profile, the messages slowed down dramatically. And the ones that I would get, you'd be surprised, but hardly anybody reads profiles these days. So I'd be suspecting that they were aware of this while conversing with them and talking to them, getting to know them. And then as soon as I'd mentioned something about it, it was a big surprise to them, even though I tried to put that information front and center about it. So that wasn't working either. So trying to find dedicated spaces for people that are trans attracted, but also trying to not find weirdos, because there's a lot of weirdos that are into us, unfortunately.
You've told me about
sucks.
that. You said that there are people that will come to you wanting to have the experience, but they're not. They'll swear up and down, "Oh, I'm not gay."
Well, those were, at that time not aware of being trans, but they once they find out, they immediately think a trans woman is a dude, and it's hard to get people's minds to change around or wrap their heads around it, and a lot of them couldn't wrap their heads around it because you know what I look like. I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't be able to wrap their heads around it.
I worked with you for 6 freaking months before I knew.
Yeah.
I had no idea, and I was like, "What?" And then somebody told me one time, and I was like, "So?" And they were like, I'm not trying to date her. We just hang out and we talk video games, and she's real cool. She likes wrestling. She likes all the nerdy stuff I like, so she's a great person to talk to. But yeah, I didn't know. I had no idea.
Out of my own curiosity, who told you?
I will tell you off air.
Okay. Because you know what? That's always the case with me. It's not that I tell people, it's that other people tell people.
Yeah. They kept telling and it was weird because there were people that knew, and then there were some that were very, hey, that's not my place, and I thought that was awesome. But when somebody told it to me, I was like, wow, they just blurted it out like I should have known. And I was like, I don't really go around asking people what their sexuality is. It's just not that big a deal. I will judge you for things like if you like bad anime. I will judge you for that. But your sexuality, your religion, or what you choose to pray to or not pray to, those aren't things I judge people for. It's not my business. That's your personal walk and your personal journey. So, yeah, it never was a subject for us. It was just we talked about movies, we talked about video games, we talked about fun stuff. And so, therefore, it was nice to have somebody at work that I could talk fun stuff with.
Yeah, that's how I was when I talked to people. But always somebody else getting into my business about things, and
oh yeah,
I hate that. But I really like Devilman Crybaby. If you want to judge me on animes, I thought that one was fantastic.
First of all, I'm not going to judge you on that one because I really enjoyed it too.
Okay, so
I still
got that out of the way.
Yeah, I would have picked that one apart. I still haven't got anybody to pick that apart with me. But like I say, I may invite you back for another show just so we can go through that one.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, but I mean, this is such a fascinating story you're telling me because, I mean, this is a lot going on. You created the profile, but how did you meet the boyfriend, though? That's what
Well, so that's when Craigslist came in to play. And I don't remember if I actually went ahead and made a post in the T for M section, or if I went to the Women for Men section. And the only reason I was doing this in reference to men because that's what I was drawing. I'd get some messages from some women and some really hot ones too, until they find out. And so that was like the case. It's like, man, if I would have just been born right and not be this way, and just had a vagina, everything in my life would have been so much better.
Yeah, it would have worked out perfectly.
Everything would have been perfect. But, you know, my mom had a miscarriage for a girl a year before she had me. So it's kind of funny how this ended up turning out with me. Although I've actually heard from a lot of other trans women that their mothers had a miscarriage for a girl or something like that before them. So yeah, what a lot of the medical science and stuff has kind of begun to show as they've learned about this is something that happens in the womb. There's some kind of cross exposure of hormones that does one thing to your brain, but then triggers your body to do something else. So that's why you end up with this mismatch going on. So I've accepted this as a medical thing that I've experienced, and transitioning was the treatment for it. But anyway, back to the Craigslist thing. Whatever ad that I put up, you know, I just put normal, decent pictures of me. It's not like I was just up there with my ass and my tits out, right, like all these other ones were. It's just normal pictures of me, paragraph about me, things I like in people. And the only thing I really wanted was for somebody to just send me a message, normal message, with normal picture attached. What ended up happening was just a lot of dudes sending pictures of their dicks. Mm-hmm. So I've experienced the dick pic craze a lot of times. So we are not free from that. We get that too. Wow. And, you know, it's just people wanting sex or wanting me to do weird things to them, which, you know, a lot of times when it comes with men that specifically like trans women, and it's not all of them, but it's happened enough times of, you know, men wanting me to fuck their ass. And that's fucking gross. I don't want to do that. But that's what they come to me wanting, and I don't know why they come to me wanting that, or why they bother any trans women for that matter, which just kind of enforces the idea that I think these dudes are just gay, but maybe there's some lack of acceptance on their end, and they want it to come from a woman or something effeminate. Dudes asking to give blowjobs. Old dudes asking me to beat up with them. I don't want to do that. Wow. Yeah. Some offering money, which I have a bit too much dignity to take money. Yeah. I've had numerous instances where I've thought about doing it, but never actually built up the courage to do that. I can't do that stuff, but it's... Eventually, I would get occasionally a normal message from somebody. Paragraph about themselves, a decent picture. And I got a couple of them like that. There was a guy named Jordan that I started talking to, and a guy named Lucas that I was talking to. And eventually I, you know, met them somewhere. And with Jordan was, I guess, technically my first boyfriend. Mm-hmm. And the thing was, though, is like after our first date, I would always have to go and drive out to go and hang out with him at his house, which was like 45 minutes away. So I was, twice a month at least going over to see him, hanging out in his room in his parents' house. But, I couldn't be too picky about their situation. It was just nice to have somebody that seemed to like me for me. And then you get to know them some. And I think that dude was like a furry or into that furry stuff, which I think is really weird. It's okay if the people are into, putting on the costumes and they want to, like Sonic Fox, the fighting game player, he, puts his fur stuff on. He's like the best fighting game player around, but whatever. I just think some of them, when it gets to the point where I see that they're like watching or they have images on their phone of animals fucking, but drawn animals fucking at that's kind of weird to me. But to each their own. Everybody's got their fetishes, I guess. Yeah. And I'd go over there and hang out with him, and he'd hold me, and that'd feel great. I loved being held and cuddled with, and feeling right. That's what felt right, or it felt right, and it felt good. Then he'd kind of want to like do things with my genitals. I didn't want that at all. I was not comfortable with men wanting to do anything with my genitals. Right. Because then at that point it's like, well, then that's what you wanted, right? And eventually he just like stopped talking to me, just out of nowhere. After like 2 months, stopped talking to me. Never talked to me again. Just, I don't know why. He just stopped. The Lucas guy I went on a date with, and then went over to his apartment with, and we didn't really do much, but cuddled, and he held me and stuff, and I liked that, and make out. But once again, he just kind of stopped talking to me, and I don't know if maybe I just had this like either a terrible personality or they wanted something specific out of me and I was not giving them that, or something. I don't know. But after those 2 strikes, there was a guy I actually met from a place that wasn't Craigslist. I met him at Best Buy. It was this tall black dude who was in the Air Force. And what was special about him was that when I went to Best Buy, it was my first time working at a job that people didn't know me already at. So at first, guys would come up to me in my department and start talking to me. So I was continuing to get this attention that was unfamiliar, but felt nice. And I think he was the only one that had the balls to come up to me and ask for my phone number. And I'm like having that moment of never having had somebody clearly either hit on me or make a move on me in person. It's always, everything has been involved with the internet, and we'd talk a bit and then try to establish things there. But this was purely organic in the wild, so to speak. Wanted my phone number, so I started to get really nervous, and I'm like, I need to tell you, this is what I am. And he was okay with it. And that was nice. For once. All we ended up doing, though, is having a fun time during Mardi Gras. And then I found out he actually had a girlfriend the whole time. And so I'm guessing I was a little secret of some sort. And that didn't feel good, knowing that.
Yeah, you were a side chick.
I was a side chick, possibly side fetish. I don't know. Yeah. He didn't want to do anything with my genitalia. But he also knew that I didn't want dudes doing anything with my genitalia, so I guess that's maybe why he didn't. Right. But, after that, we would still kind of, like, talk, but we weren't, like, gonna, like, actually date, because he had his girlfriend, and I wasn't gonna mess with that. I'd let you do your thing, and, whatever comes out about this, that's your problem, bruh. Yeah. Not mine. So I keep looking, and then eventually I get another message from Craigslist of this guy from northern Louisiana wanted to go on dates. Seemed nice at first. Seemed like really like country boy. So that really made it seem like he was very straight. At least at first. So it was weird because he would want to buy me things. I never had anybody want to buy me things.
Right.
I know girls get that all the time, or certain kinds of girls get that a lot and thrive off of that, actually. But I was never that kind of person of like, I want a sugar daddy. It'd be nice to have a sugar daddy, but it's not what I was looking for. So we would continue to go on these dates, and he'd take me out, and seemed like he genuinely wanted to love me for me. And after probably at that point 1,000+ rejections, it felt like this was the best it was going to get for me. Even though I didn't necessarily think he was attractive, he wasn't. He was shorter than me. He was a half Asian, half white dude, and he definitely had the Asian part down in his lower half.
Whoa.
Yeah. About, and I'd hate to even go into this level of depth, but it's a weird thing. Or when like the first time I saw him naked, it looked like his dick had been chopped off, because he had this like his ball sack was hanging there, and it looked like there was a space above it where a penis once was, but it actually goes into him. Weird. Yeah. Well, there's all kinds of other bad things about him, but that's just a particular thing, because when he would be at full staff, was still about half as big as me. So that was awkward. That was funny.
You're having weird issues with this one already.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, fine. The guy's not physically attractive. He was very nice to me. I should be a bit more grateful, because this is what I get. And that, I think, was part of the problem early on, was I kept thinking this was the best it's going to get for me. I should just take it and accept it. And he was trying really hard, too. And I appreciated the effort of this person trying really hard, who maybe hasn't been having success with other women. Right. And found success in this one, who happens to, pass really well, and he didn't seem remotely interested in any of the masculine parts about me, but accepted me. And at first it was nice to have somebody love me like that. And eventually he would make a big deal about how his family was finding out about me and giving him shit about it. Now, this is all stuff that he just told. Mind you, everything I'm going to tell you are things that he told me. Might not actually be the truth, but this is all I had to go on, was his word. And that would lead down a lot of things. But he'd tell me that, like, I think his family was Pentecostal Christian. Like, really hardcore Christian, too. The kind that go to a mega church. Right. One of those. Yeah. And that, like, apparently his mom did some research on me and found out about me and, threatened him. And that, like, apparently his grandfather pulled a shotgun on him or something like that. He was feeding me a lot of stuff that made it seem like I was this big burden on his life. That the simple existence of me in his life has caused all kinds of terrible things to happen to him. So that now he's having to move away from home and come down here and find a place to live. And so we try to find a place to live, and we stay together, and we go from like living in one friend's trailer to another friend's trailer, and eventually getting an apartment together in a trailer park, mind you. And, we have, I guess, our plan to go to Austin, because he was going to get some money from an accident that he got, and he was willing to use it to allow us to move together to Austin. And Eventually, we would get to that point. Although we were fine up until before moving to Austin. We were fine up until an incident happened with him and this girl who was my best friend at the time. And she was somebody that I loved very much. It's somebody that I went to a lot during the start of my transition, and she was there for me. And weird thing about her, though, was that I developed feelings for her and loved her a lot. She seemed like she was sort of developing feelings for me and kind of teasing me some, but then would like back off on it. So she would play this like tease game with me, kind of. I don't know if she necessarily saw it that way or understood it that way, but that's how it was coming off to me. So he knew that I loved her so much and that me and her were almost inseparable. And I don't know if he was like jealous of that, but eventually she actually lived in our shitty little trailer park apartment with us because she wanted to get away from her family. And her and him had this big fight with each other. I forgot what it was about even. It was just a big fight. Something about him having to go to work and she agreeing to pick him up or something like that, and then she was doing something else. And I don't know. They had this like massive fight that I just sat there and watched as like my friendship with her crumbles as a result of this, because I felt like I couldn't necessarily side against him, but I wasn't siding with him. I was being neutral. And that's when he started to become a lot worse, a lot more controlling, kind of talked down to me a lot more. He also started to let out a bit about how much of a racist he was, because, you know, I told him that I dated a black dude before him. He thought that I had let somebody taint me and that I deserved to be shot in the gut for letting somebody do that to me. That's how fucking weird this dude was.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? You know, N-words all the time about dudes. And he wasn't like this in the beginning, mind you. It was only like kind of after this moment with this fight happened that he started to make a turn. And I was already with him for a while. We had our plan set up to move to Austin. I'm like, maybe things will be so much better when we move to Austin. And we eventually moved to Austin, got an apartment in Austin. We had a roommate live with us who was also a trans woman that I also met through Craigslist. Actually, just to make friends. I was like, hey, I don't know anybody in Austin. You're trans. I'm trans. Let's be friends. And we go and we meet her and be friends. And the idea of like helping us with getting an apartment came up. And so eventually she lived with us and she paid rent. She was cool. She also used to do porn. So she was hot. Like, I was super jealous of her. She only did a few things though, and then she got a real job and started working in like healthcare and stuff. We were in Austin. We had an apartment. I ended up getting that job at EA. Man, things seemed
like
fine.
You were broken when you said that part about EA, but that's another story.
Yeah. I mean, I was really excited at first because it was like, man, I'm starting to live the dream that I thought was, you know, destined to have. I'm going to go to Austin, get a job in the games industry. Yeah, I go work for EA. You know, me and him were kind of okay. He stopped being as much of an asshole. But I know the girl brought it up in the abuse episode that you did. It's not like these things were daily or monthly occurrences. It was once in a while, something stirs up and a side of him comes out where he wants to be very controlling and emotionally abusive, where he'd, I guess, want to play the whole like, because of my presence in his life, I cause all kinds of bad things to happen with him and his family because they're really religious, and because he was with me and stuff, really like making me feel like shit for it, for just existing. He wouldn't let me go and hang out with people. Like if I wanted to go hang out with my friend Katrina or somebody from EA after work, or even our roommate wanting to go downtown and take me out downtown just to have me out. He would throw massive fits.
I remember where we were all going to go. I had a bunch of friends in town, and we were all going to Arcade UFO. And I made a post about it online on Facebook. And you were like, I want to go. And I went, I can come pick you up if you want to go. It's not that big a deal. And I remember you told me I can't go. And I was like, what? And that's when I first heard about it. So I remember the insanity that kind of surrounded him when you told me that I can't go. And I was like, really? And I was just kind of blown away by it. You know, it's like, wow, what? And I was like, so does he think everybody's out to get you or everybody's chasing you? And you were like, yeah, he's a little bit crazy. You know, it is what it is. And so I was just like, okay, you know, you can't fight it. And I didn't want to cause any, you know, heartache or harm. So it was one of those things where I said, hey, look, no harm, no foul. But if you ever want to meet us there or want to go to the arcade with us, let us know. There was a bunch of us going and it was not a problem. But yeah, I totally remember that whole thing.
Yeah, a lot of things I missed out on because I loved going to Arcade UFO. I love fighting games, and just to be able to go there, play fighting games against people, make friends while I'm at it, you know, were all the things I always wanted to do, but then he wouldn't let me do them. Right. Like there was this group of people who apparently played a lot of Mortal Kombat X when Mortal Kombat X came out. And I used to be a tournament to Mortal Kombat 9 player. I used to go to tournaments for that. And play it a whole bunch before transitioning because that came out before then. Mm-hmm. But then, you know, even during my transition, I was still playing it, still trying to go do things and play against people. So when Mortal Kombat X came out, I was trying to reach out to these people like, I'd like to come and play with y'all and you know, play offline. You level up with people and you get better as a player. He wouldn't let me do any of that. As benign as something like that was. Maybe he thought I was always out to leave him. And he was right. A lot of the times I wanted to just outright leave him. But I also have a thing about me of when somebody's there for me, when a lot of other people aren't there for me, I tend to be very loyal to them. Mm-hmm. And so in a lot of ways, he was there for me when nobody else was there for me. And he allowed this thing to happen of me and him going to Austin. And having an apartment and us having jobs and being for the most part, a normal straight couple. But then he'd be all weird. Right. And the more weird he got and the more controlling he got and the more depressed it made me. And it wouldn't necessarily make me like suicidal, but I'd just be like, I hate this kind of existence that I've fallen into. I felt trapped into it really more than anything. Like if I could just get out of this, I'm good, but it seemed like there was no way out, and I'm pretty sure my performance at EA was affected by that because I just kind of walk in and whatever, I'm just here, yeah. And I'm existing.
I just want to get through each day. That's all I'm trying to do. Yeah,
and you know, it was really hard to be positive and uplifting about anything. When as soon as I'd go home, he would be like this big man child a lot of the times too. Like his reactions, I think he was probably a bit autistic, because his reactions to things were some of the most over dramatic and angry. He'd get really angry. He was also like really incapable of doing some basic things. Like I always had to make food for him because he couldn't really cook for himself. So I don't know if maybe he was just wanting somebody to fill that role for a woman that he had in his head of I cook for him, my man or whatever. And I'm like, dude, you can make a fucking sandwich. You can fry up some eggs. I don't have to always cook everything for you. Stuff like that. And then, you know, he was often very demanding of sex, even when I didn't want to do so. A lot of times when I didn't want to do so. But the longer I'd push him off of it, the angrier he got. So the more I had to just kind of let him do it. And that's when I'd resort to drinking a lot more and finding drugs to just kind of numb me to it. And because I wasn't into this guy at all anymore at this point, he was becoming unbearable. And it's not like he was this, super fine man to begin with. Like, if he was a really attractive dude, I probably would have tolerated a lot more, but he wasn't. He wasn't worth all this. And everybody would always tell me, like, this guy's not worth it. This guy, and just in my own mind, just constantly going back to, but this was the best it got for me. I'd already been rejected thousands of times over. I'm not going to get much better than this, because who wants a fucking tranny? And that's been the mindset that whole time. And eventually, because he was always about like snooping into stuff, looking into my Facebook, looking into messages, stuff like that, seeing who I've talked to. And then one day I look into his stuff while he's passed out, and he's got like kick messages from some other trans woman, and like his email history of like him responding to Craigslist ads from like cross-dressers and stuff like that, and being very suggestive about like, him wanting to be topped or something like that. All these things that never were apparent to me with him in person, but finding out all this stuff was like, now it all makes sense about why he was so adamant about keeping me or something like that. But he just ended up being another one of those weirdos.
Yeah, that's terrible. So how long ago did you break up with him?
Let's see. We had moved to Austin like February 2014, and my friend Katrina had this idea of helping me escape, because she was my best friend in Austin. Me and her spent so much time together. Even though he would try to prevent us from spending time with each other, we would just always hang out at her house, where her and her husband and her son lived. She's like, hey, you can come stay with us. It's getting bad, because it was getting to a point where we were, not only was he getting more and more angry about things, but we were fighting, and we were getting to like fights. Like it'd be combat fights. And even though he was shorter than me, he was bigger and bulkier than me and much stronger than me. So when we get into those kind of conflicts, I just have to, I guess, flip this switch in my mind to just be like, I'm going to have to summon back that persona I used to have and really like summon the strength to fight this motherfucker. And so we get into fist fighting and trying to choke each other. And there was one time he, because something on Facebook and somebody said something, I don't even know what it was, but I was sleeping and he just storms into the bedroom yelling and screaming at me. So I said something to him, and I don't know. I got to a point where I was just constantly insulting him about everything. And so he lunged at me while I'm laying in bed. And when he lunged at me, I managed to get my arm around. He lunged at me to where he was like trying to tackle me while I was laying in bed, but I got up and caught his head under my arm, and I dug my fingers into his throat and started squeezing his throat. If you know that kind of choke that I'm talking about, where you're just grabbing the esophagus and just squeezing it and he was like swinging at me and throwing me around. I'm just holding on to this choke, and I'm seriously like, I'm going to kill this motherfucker right here. He deserves it. And I wasn't thinking. I had flipped that switch in my head. I'm ready for conflict now. And I held that choke on him for so long until he bit the shit out of my arm. And it kicked him off of me, and we just kind of flew away from each other and eventually calmed down and stopped fighting. It would get like that is what it would get to. So when it got to end, on top of that, finding the emails and the messages, it was time to go, and it's time to find a way out. And Katrina was willing to help me with that. We planned a thing while he was going to work because he was delivering pizza at the time. Which, mind you, also when he was delivering pizza, this was the third vehicle that we had together. He had gotten 2 other vehicles that we had gotten repossessed because he wasn't paying the notes on them. Even though at one point in time I was working full-time at EA, full-time EA check, and I'd be like, how much are the bills this month? And I'd basically have to give him most of all my money, and these monies were going to bills. They were going to his video games. So he'd be buying video games all the time. So it's like all that together just made like the absolute worst person I could have possibly been with. I had to go, and while he was off working, me and Katrina tried to get my stuff. He came back in the middle of his shift while we're getting stuff and caught us. And he was throwing a big fit about wanting to call the cops for some reason. Don't know what. He made up stuff, and we get what I could, and there was a lot of stuff I couldn't bring with me. I know I had to leave behind a white PlayStation 4, a Destiny PlayStation 4. And I had PT installed on it too. Yeah, not getting that back. And it also had my copy of Mortal Kombat X inside the disk drive. When I did actually finally get away, I had a case for Mortal Kombat X with no disc in it. All kinds of stuff that I had acquired over time, like clothes and stuff, left there. I just went and stayed with Katrina for a while. And so we were kind of feeling celebratory, like, oh, I finally am out of there. And this was actually around the time of my birthday. I left him through like 3 days before my birthday, my 28th birthday. So I had like this spectacular birthday that year of me and Katrina going to our favorite bar and having fun, hanging out with all these people. And this really, really attractive girl gave me a lap dance. And things seemed like they were going fine, but then like apparently he had been harassing them repeatedly, and they were getting child protective services called on them because he would say shit that make up stuff that they were doing, like that they were treating the kid terribly or something, they're abusing their children or something like that, or trying to make a case about how me living there was endangering the kid, exposing the kid to some stuff. And so they were constantly getting messed with by child protective services. And my brother had called me and was trying to find out what was going on. And I'm like, I've escaped from him. We're dealing with all this stuff and whatever. And eventually, like, he talked to Katrina and she explained what's happening. And then it got to my parents. So my parents decided to come and get me. They came all the way over to Austin from over here and got what we could that I had brought, thinking that I was going to come back there in like 2 months because me and her had this plan that, okay, I'm going to go back to Louisiana for a couple months, let things cool down, and then she'll come get me and I'll be able to go back to Austin. That plan fell out. She ended up encountering some other problems that was her fault, some of it. But that ended up causing her and her husband to split up and get a divorce. So a lot of my stuff was still at their house, so that I still don't have. I left things that we couldn't fit into my parents' SUV. It was full of all kinds of stuff. That's what ended up leading me to being back here, being away from him. So I finally was free of him, but then it led to another problem of not only am I back here and back in my parents' house, my hormone medication was running out, and I had a prescription in Austin. And while I was here, I was trying to get an updated prescription for it, but then apparently the doctor's office of the one that I went to in Austin was no longer there anymore, and I couldn't get a prescription refilled. So I went from finally escaping from this monster that had this control over me and coming back, but now I don't have my hormone medication, and I wasn't able to get my hormone medication for quite a long time. And that ended up leading into me basically being forced to detransition for a while. So it's one nightmare into another night.
Yeah, now I remember when you were going through that, I kind of reached out to you to check on you at that one point, and I was like, you kind of told me what was happening. It's like, hey, after you're off this meds for a while, you start growing the hair back, you start getting, the voice starts to change. Like, how quick does it happen? Do you start to transition?
Well, I was fine for the first couple months. I come back here in November 2015. I run out of medicine like near the end of December. Actually, no, I think I ran out about like more so like earlier in December. But first few weeks, it's not so bad. After that, though, was when I really started to feel uncomfortable, like mentally uncomfortable, like just really depressed. But I don't know if I was also experiencing like post-traumatic stuff, because I just come off of escaping from that other situation, and now I'm suddenly back in Louisiana. I'm back around all these people again, and I don't have any medication. So after like a couple months, not having medication, not being able to get any more again, I had one crazy plan with a girl I was friends with of trying to get myself committed to see if going to a mental health ward I can get some medication, get a prescription, which that was a week of hell trying to get that, which was weird because I go to a hospital and I talk to the doctor about, basically at that point not wanting to exist because I don't know, it's just I felt the fog come back. I felt the net come back over my brain, and it didn't help that I was also around a bunch of people that were referring to me differently than how I'm normally referred to. So they weren't very reinforcing people or uplifting people as these changes are occurring with me again that are changing me back. So it was getting to a point where I every day was just hoping that God would take me in my sleep. That I didn't want to be awake. I didn't want to wake up. Because even going to the mental health ward and telling them all that, I spent a week there. First 2 days, actually, I've spent to a holding area at the hospital. Normally, people who get put in this holding area to be sent off to mental health wards are there for like several hours. I was there for 2 days, and in this place that all they had were rubber hard beds and nothing else. Because they were having a hard time trying to find a place to put me, seeing if anybody was willing to accept a trans person in their care and try to get a bed for me. The place I ended up going to ended up giving me my own room by myself because they couldn't put me in there with men. They couldn't put me in there with women. So I just got my own room by myself, which was kind of cool because I did a lot of calisthenics in it. I didn't have to go to bed when everybody else went to bed. But even going there for a while and getting some medication back, it wasn't enough. I had like a script for a month or so, and that was it. They told me about some places I could go to, but I didn't have insurance because Medicaid hadn't been expanded in Louisiana at that time. Now it has, and I have Medicaid. Right. But at that point, it hadn't been. So trying to find a doctor that was willing to treat me, for one, and treat me for hormone replacement therapy was difficult, especially nearby. Like most of the ones are in ones I went to before was in Baton Rouge. So I couldn't keep going back to Baton Rouge and paying like $150 every time I visited her. Yeah, so it was
and Baton Rouge
terrible.
Isn't close to you either.
No, it's an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Okay, so it is about 2 hours. What's the speed limits now? Is it still, 65, 70 through there?
It's been a while since I've driven, so yeah. I think it was 70, or like sometimes I would haul ass down I-10 and do like 80.
Oh, well, okay, that'll work too.
Yeah.
That's the Louisiana way. But yeah, I just remember that used to be. It used to seem like when I was younger that was a longer drive. But yeah, I get it.
So, no hormones.
Hmm.
Back home, back at Domino's. So it was like everything's gone in complete reverse from what it was. And I just missed being in Austin so much because I felt like that was where my future was. That was where I could possibly succeed. So it was weird. I didn't have freedom, but I had life there. And then I come here and I had freedom, but no life.
Yeah. And then let me ask you this. So now you're back there. How did the people at Domino's treat you? Because obviously they see this is a new person than who used to work there.
I mean, I did work there even as Karen for a while, up until moving to Austin.
Oh,
and so it's not like I'd stopped. So people there had gotten used to it, but there's still a lot of people that like to say things behind my back. Some people had a hard time like changing over pronouns and stuff, and that's not fun. Anytime I'm around people that want to insist on using those pronouns and a dead name, it feels like getting punched in the kidney.
which to me, and I'm not trying to knock anybody, but to me it just seems like it's not that hard. If you tell me your name, I have a hard time remembering a name. But if you tell me the name, and I'm gonna say what's the name again, and you tell me a second time, I know we don't have that problem. It was, I guess, and I'm 47, so I grew up in a different time period. And
Yeah.
if I'm this old and came from that time period, and I don't have a problem using the correct pronoun and remembering the name, nobody younger than me has a damn excuse as far as I'm concerned. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. It's to be respectful of somebody's humanity. It's not that hard to respect somebody's decision.
I mean, for me, it's not really a decision so much as this is necessary for me to sustain life.
Exactly. And they can't respect that. That bothers me.
Yeah. It's weird because I had experienced something not too long ago of meeting somebody and knowing somebody for a little bit and then finding out that they were trans and wanting to start transitioning and then start going by a different name, different pronouns. I fucked up those pronouns and names sometimes. So it's even knowing consciously that this is how they want to be referred to. It's hard to make a switch on somebody you've known for a while. So I understand people slipping. It's when you refuse to try. That's what gets me. That's what gets me about my dad in particular and my brother. They refuse to try. My mom tries. Chris tries. But not my brother Dustin and my dad. So that's the split there with people. It's I appreciate if you try, even if you fuck up. If you don't try, you're essentially on my shit list, and you're declaring yourself an enemy, which it really sucks when it's family that do things that the same people who are enemies do. Which was hard, especially not having hormones and seeing myself change back and feeling like shit all the time and not being uplifted by people that at that time probably should have been the most supportive and uplifting people in my life, but weren't. So I didn't really have much else to go to. And, I just sat in my room and I felt like I was wasting away, rotting away, changing back. I did end up eventually meeting a girl through Craigslist, of all places. Her name is Christine, and she is one of the most important people to come into my life because she wanted to love me for me. She's a lesbian, for one, so she's not remotely interested in men or attracted to them. She's only attracted to women, but again, I did a thing of put up a couple of nice pictures, a nice paragraph, and she just liked it and wanted to message me. And hey, we're still together 2.5 years later. So, and it's been nothing like the other relationship has been. But I did feel bad because, she was attracted to women, and then even though she saw me as one, I didn't feel like I was one anymore because the testosterone had come back and all these other things about me were changing. Even though when I'd go out, I'd still, present as me, but I was beginning to feel like I was losing myself because I didn't have this medication anymore. So it's weird for me to think about like other me that don't have medication or don't need it. Like, I don't know why they wouldn't need it, because I need estrogen to function. Right. If testosterone is my primary hormone, I'm not functioning. So me and her were together, and she stuck it out with me while I was suffering through detransitioning. And I felt like I led her on because she was attracted to women, and then here I am being much less womanly than I was just a year prior to that, physically. Up until last year. It wasn't till last year. It was when I was finally able to get hormones again. But having distractions was good. Having her around was good. And as negative as a person as I normally am, eventually I started to try and tell myself that I'm not going to just lay down and die. I'm going to stand up and fight this and not let it win. Not let the world win so easily. I'm going to find a way to get through this. And eventually, after getting fired from Papa John's around here, going to another pizza place because that's all I could ever get here, I ended up spending my last $17 I had on a book called The Will to Keep Winning by Daigo Umehara. I don't know if you are familiar with Daigo Umehara, the Street Fighter player, but he's a legendary Street Fighter player, and he wrote this book that isn't necessarily about fighting games or about winning at fighting games, but is about the will, and that the will is the most important thing, and learning about that will to keep winning and the will to grow and improve as a person and pick a direction and follow that direction. And if you keep following that direction, eventually the accolades come to you. And I ended up developing that mindset, even though I was feeling terrible all the time and didn't want to exist. I developed this mindset, the will, I guess, to fight through it, and eventually decided to set up going to college, which I'm now just finished my third semester of. And eventually there was a homeless shelter here that started offering care for trans people on Medicaid, because I got Medicaid. And I ended up getting my hormones back last August. I've been on them since. And that immediately made a huge change mentally and physically for me. All the body hair started to go away again. Changes in my face and my shape again, my skin. And just most importantly, the net and the fog came off of my brain. And what a great time for that to happen, such as going into college, because then I was able to think and do well, which I'm still doing well in it, and still working towards finishing that. And, me and Chrissy are still together, and we have our plans of where we want to go when we're done, and, continuing to stand up and fight for that rather than just lay down and die, because I'm not going to do that. She's not going to do that. We're going to keep following this direction until the accolades come to us.
I love it. I freaking love it. All right, so let's talk about
that's where I'm at. That's been my whole story. Sorry for so long trying to get to the whole story done, but that's 6.5 years of me transitioning, summed up in however long that was.
Yeah, we've been here for a while, but I appreciate you sharing the story. Now, let me ask you, before we let you go, there's something I need to know personally.
Sure.
Are you going to need a copy of Battlefield 5? Because you remember, I sent you Battlefield 1.
Yeah, that was super, super dope of you. I played a lot of Battlefield 1, mind you. I ended up buying the season pass for it and getting the DLC maps.
Yeah.
Had gone on some really big tears, so I did enjoy that a lot. I don't play a lot of PC. The thing is, I don't play a lot of PS4 games anymore.
So you want to see it?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like right now, I don't even have a good desk or keyboard and mouse. I have a laptop that I play on, and I borrowed a Steam controller from a friend of mine. So I've been trying to like play first-person shooters with a Steam controller.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting. I've been playing Quake Champions with it, and doing okay. But I don't know. I would also need to get my PlayStation Plus membership re-upped.
It don't matter. You tell me when it gets closer to it. I'm gonna get you a copy once again on whatever system you want it on. That's our thing. My thing is, I always know. Hey, my homegirl always needs one thing that's going to be that bright light around that time of year. The game always comes out around that same time of year. So that's my gift to your light always, because you got the fire, you got the vision, you're sticking to it. I'm going to definitely make sure that you're going to win this one. You getting this copy, so you just tell me when the time comes out what you want it on, and I'll make sure you get it.
Well, you're such a sweetheart and a wonderful person, and thank you very much. I'm sorry I couldn't actually cover a lot of the topics you wanted, and I just focused on my story. But hopefully that has given insights on my particular experience, which I know that is not the worst experience, but it's made me the person I am today.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of times it's not that I need you to give everybody's experience. Your experience may open up somebody else's eyes to what's going on. Your story may educate somebody about something that they're doing or something that they could do to make it better for someone else. And so from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for just coming on here and sharing your story with us. And hopefully it helps somebody else to get through it that's going through it too. So that's always one of the best things I can hope for with this.
If you want to do a part 2 on more specific issues that you want my commentary on, I'd be more than happy to do that.
I would love to. Yeah, we definitely should come back and visit this again, because I think the more I'm starting to look at it, the more I'm starting to learn about it, the more I feel like I've been blessed with this platform and I got to use it to help as many people as I can before they put dirt on me. So we definitely need to come back to this one.
Well, I look forward to that. I'd be down for it again.
Awesome. Well, all right, guys, we're about to wrap this show up. I just want to thank everybody that stuck with us and listened to this. As you know, there are going to be some tags on the podcast. We're going to put information for you guys on how you can help, how you can assist. A lot of the information that I've been able to dig up is things that are aimed at our LGBT. Is it BT?
Sometimes I like to say LGBTQ,
yeah.
But that's when I'm being sarcastic about it.
Yeah.
I think it's just LGBT, but then people want to add all these other letters to the end of it, and
I know. It's hard enough for me just trying to get the one right and just say, hey, I don't want to mess this up. But I did get information, and I'm going to share it, especially the Trevor Project, which reaches out to help the teens going through it. Also, if you feel like you are suicidal, there are a lot of places that can help you. There are places you can reach out to. I'm going to make sure that they get all those numbers. Also, just remember from our first show, guys, National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. I'm also going to put in the numbers for Samaritans in the UK, as well as Lifeline in Australia, because we do have those listeners that have been supporting Rodical Thinking since day one in the UK and Australia. Going to get these numbers out to you and reach out to us. And if you just need someone to talk to, the email, Roderick ready to serve 71@gmail.com. That's the email that reaches directly to me for this show. I answer all those emails personally, and we're just here for you, and hopefully we make a difference. And guys, as I always say, everybody has an amazing story if you're just willing to listen to it, and please be kind to one another. Y'all have a wonderful week. Peace.